Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate you lending a little bit of your time with us as we try to enlighten you in a topic that's pretty important to the public. My name is Shalana Poole. I'm a certified divorce financial analyst and a certified financial planner. My company, I actually have two different ones, is Spoole 360 Divorce and Flashpoint Financial Services. We offer a wider range of financial services and wealth management services for our clients across the board, but today's focus is really on divorce and credit. I am very, very honored to be working and partnering with the San Marcos Public Library. We have Deborah Carter, who is a librarian there and the program's chair, who puts this on and works with us. We're really, really excited to do that. What we're going to do is go through this conversation, go through this topic, this presentation, all the way through, and we encourage you that if you have questions, please put them in the chat or save them for the end. We will be stopping the recording at the end, just shy of the questions, and this will be uploaded to the San Marcos Public Library YouTube channel for further resources. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. As you see, this is my contact information, and I'll give it to you again at the end. I will tell you that I absolutely love educating the public. I love it to the point where I've been told that I had a heart of a teacher. And divorce is something that is sticky. I did go through my own domestic restructuring many years ago. That's what I call a divorce. So I have not only book knowledge on the topic, but a lot of practical knowledge as well. Today's topic we are going to focus on is divorce and credit, and how do we protect ourselves going forward. Who we are, just a little bit of background of who we are. Spoole 360 Divorce is almost the bridge point between your legal representation, your counselor, your financial advisor, and moving on to the next chapter of your life. We are not in this capacity serving as your financial advisor, but we are the certified divorce financial analyst that helps you understand your financial position and how to equitably split the assets so that it's equitable for everybody involved. And we know that when you go through a domestic restructuring, it's chaotic. It's just chaotic. It's chaotic from a knowledge base perspective. It's chaotic from emotional. You have all of these questions that are forming in your head, and you just don't know where to go. How do I get here? Why am I here? How do I get to the next stage in life? How do I protect myself? All of these questions can lead to a number of confusion that could literally paralyze you into doing the right things for you and your family. Or it could cause you to make emotional decisions that really could hurt you in the long run from a logical standpoint. So my goal here is to kind of dispel a little bit of that confusion, a little bit of that question spaghetti, if you will, and focus a little bit on the credit today. What is credit? As we know, it's when you owe someone something. It's when you borrow something from a bank, a person, or an entity and have to pay it back. When you are as one, and I'll just kind of jump right into this, when you are as one, your credit is for better or worse. You have collected that credit in the state of Texas because we are a community property state. And the creditors are expecting payment back. What do we do? What do we do? From a legal perspective, the creditors, the people that you borrowed money from, the banks, the auto loans, the house payment, etc., they're expecting that payment back regardless of who gets the debt at the end of the divorce. So that is a legal obligation when you go in to borrow that money. That is a legal obligation between you and that creditor to have some type of payment plan to pay it back. One thing that's really important to note, and I've noticed this by doing all of these cases, is you need to know where you stand from a debt perspective, from a credit perspective, right? And we're probably familiar with credit reports. I highly recommend that you get a copy of all three of your credit reports, and that's from Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. and know what's on that report. One of the services that we offer is we actually go through that report with you. And sometimes there's some gotchas. There's some accounts on there that we opened up once and completely forgot about. A common one is the furniture. You know, you go to a furniture store to buy your couch as husband and wife or spouse and spouse, and you think, oh, this is a great deal, we'll get 0%. And you sign up for that. Well, oftentimes that's forgotten. The line is still left open, but it's on your credit report. And these are things that are important to know once you are thinking about going through a transitional time in your life, like a divorce, because we don't want to leave anything open to where it could come back and bite you in the end. Okay, even when it's not intentional, it could come back and bite you. I will say that everyone is entitled to get their credit report from annualcreditreport.com. This does not give you your score. All we're interested in at this particular point is knowing what's in your credit report, okay? And all that should be reported. So annualcreditreport.com, you get one free report per year from all three agencies, and it's really good to have that for your own knowledge base, whether you go through your domestic restructuring or not. Your credit score is FICO. That is rather important. That's the next stage when you're thinking about what to do going forward after your divorce. We need to make sure that your credit score is something that's credit worthy for establishing the next phase of your life. I'll take a real quick note here to say, I am not a credit reporting agency. I'm not a credit expert, or I do not fight credit scores or items on your report. However, I will sit down with you and help you understand what's in that so that you can be prepared when it comes to splitting assets, splitting debts, and getting started on the next phase. So as I mentioned before, your credit report will show all the debts that you have and the legal obligations you have with the lenders that you went through. And things are on there, as I mentioned before, all the loans, your mortgages, your car notes, your boat notes, your credit cards and things of that nature. If you have purchased a timeshare, which some of us has done in the past, and you owe money on that timeshare, that will be reported on there. If you have co-signed, very, very important, you've co-signed on a loan for one reason or another, that should show up on your credit report as well. And it also legally obligates you to continue to pay for that particular debt. Medical information is on there. Some personal information, employment, and limited public records are on your credit report as well. And then some of your previous addresses. All of this information is very important. I'll go back to what I said before. When you're in this emotional state and having to consider going through a domestic restructuring, there are tons of questions that swirl around in your mind. And often things get overlooked. I know I'm being repetitive because it is very important. And things as in your employment information is really important to know. Sometimes it's easier to get a hold of it if it's just on that one report. Previous addresses are reported on there. All of this is very vital information that you want to take stock of while you're preparing and going through your transition. Here are some areas that we want to make sure we are aware of that have been gotcha points in the past. So sometimes, again, going back to that credit report, there may be some unknown accounts on there. And what happens, you don't know that account exists. Maybe you opened it when you lived at one address, moved, relocated, but didn't update your address with that particular creditor or lender. And so you end up missing payments because they're sending statements to a place where you're not getting that mail anymore, that correspondence. Those things do happen. And if you're missing payments, as we know, it negatively affects your credit report. So we want to make sure we stay on top of those as much as possible. Something that is also a gotcha that I've seen is court-ordered payments. So when you've gone through your domestic restructuring, everything's done, the court says, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Jane, here's where we are. You, Mr. Jane, are supposed to take care of the mortgage. Mrs. Jane, you no longer have to take care of that mortgage. Well, that's fine and dandy from a court perspective, but the legal agreement, the original legal agreement was that you and Mr. and Mrs. Jane would be paying on that mortgage. So even though the court says he has to be responsible for paying for it, it still falls on your credit report and your responsibility in case he's not paying for it. So you want to make sure you're properly prepared for that, or you have some contingency plans in place to protect yourself if the debts are not being taken care of. You have joint credit cards and co-signed accounts, as I spoke about earlier. We want to make sure we have things in place that we are able to protect ourselves with. And when I say that, that means maybe at the time of divorce or sometime during a transitionary period, it's written that you have to refinance the mortgage into that person's name going forward, which doesn't mean you're necessarily off the title, that's different, but refinancing the debt into the name of the person who is court ordered to pay that particular debt. If you have joint debt together, maybe disassembling that debt to where it's on one name and the other. Credit cards is what I'm really referring to. You end up getting your own credit card, doing some balance transfers, and moving forward from there. That way, you're protecting yourself in the case that the other person is unable to pay those debts that are still legally bound to you. One other gotcha that I've seen is minimal to no credit history. So unfortunately, relationships aren't always equal, meaning that sometimes there's one spouse that has a much better credit history than the other spouse, and the other one hasn't really had the opportunity to build their credit up for one reason or another. So then when they go through their domestic restructuring, now the one spouse that didn't have that opportunity is left starting over completely. And we all know that when we have minimal credit history, it's sometimes as debilitating as having a bad credit history as well. So she is going to have to reestablish themselves or establish themselves from a credit perspective in the eyes of the creditor in order to make certain financial moves going forward. These are things that I would highly recommend that we keep in mind when you're going through this particular process. Hopefully I'm not going too fast. So what do? How do I untangle all of this? And one that I've already kind of stressed a lot is identify everything that you own, everything that you owe. Get your hands on statements. If they're being emailed to one spouse versus the other, make sure that you're getting copies of those statements. If they are being mailed to a PO box or to a different address, make sure you're getting copies of those statements. Understand how to log in and view a lot of accounts. Okay, so time has changed and everything is electronic these days. So we may want to make sure you have the proper login information, create the login information and everything of that nature while you're going through this process so that you'll have access to the data as well. Each spouse has access to the data as well. Continue making the payments. Even though this could be a rocky situation, if it's not amicable, I would definitely recommend that you continue making those payments so that you don't damage your credit going forward. Something that I have seen is it's really important that you go through and either freeze or lock your credit reports so that if something is, and monitor your credit reports, those last two go hand in hand, so that if something is going awry on your credit, you get an alert about it. Or if someone is trying to open credit in your name or do something in your particular name, that it's frozen and it could only be done if the credit agency is reaching out to you directly to unlock that account. That's a really good safe feature to protect yourself going forward. And then again, anywhere possible, if you have minimal to no credit or your credit isn't as stellar as you would like for it to be, find time to recognize that and start building your own credit going forward in different ways. And each situation is different, so we could talk about that if needed. Where do you get help? So as I mentioned before, I am not a credit counselor, or do I fight derogatory or misinformation on your credit report. I would point you into the direction of a consumer credit counseling agency. I actually think it's called Consumer Credit Counseling Agency. If you Google that, you should have access to contact information for them. get your credit report, as I mentioned before. Work with your legal representation. That could be your divorce lawyer, your mediator. That's someone who is working with you and your spouse to help you understand each other when you can't understand each other. And then in some cases where it's appropriate, get the appropriate counseling that you have. Last but not least, I would definitely make a point to reach out to your financial representative if you're working with the financial advisor, or if you have someone that you trust or an organization like myself. Reach out to them and let us all help you, this entire group of people, walk you through your process. You do not have to do it alone. And you can very well get a divorce on your own. It's called pro se, and with all the resources that the library has to offer. But there's something to be said about getting the legal help to look for all the nuances that are specific to your case, the financial help that are specific to your case, and then the right level of counseling if needed for your credit, for your mental health, etc. We're all here to work with you to make that work. I know I went through that relatively quick. I wanted to make sure that I left room for questions, should we have any. And I'm an open book, and so if I take your question, I'll be sure to give you a response. And if I don't know it, I will look it up and get back with you, or do the research to get back with you. Again, this is my contact information. My name is Shalana Poole with Spoole 360 Divorce. I really appreciate you being on this particular call and look forward to fielding your questions. Deborah?
Thank you so much, Shalana. I'm going to turn off the recording, but I just want to say thank you for your expertise and for Spoole 360 Divorce. And I'm really glad you have your contact information up there. And that you mentioned the library resources. We have forms, but it can't replace the personal touch that folks like Shalana and others in the community can provide. Thanks, everybody.